Hey, what's up guys? Will here for GSM Arena. We have here today the Realme 8, and it's another example of a smartphone that's quite different from the 5G model of the same name. It can be confusing, so let's see what's special about the Realme 8 in our full review. The Realme 8 is a budget smartphone with a flashy two-tone finish and a prominent Dare to Leap logo on the curved backside. The phone is made from plastic, but it's glossy enough that it resembles glass, and the frame is plastic as well. The Realme 8 feels a bit smaller in the hand than the Realme 7, and it comes with a few upgrades. There's a new AMOLED display, an optical under-display fingerprint reader, as well as a 64-megapixel main camera which we saw on last year's Asian Realme 7, but not the global version. However, unlike the Realme 7, on both the Realme 8 and the Realme 8 5G, you miss out on having water-repellent coating and seals on the ports. Going back to the display, it's a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED with a 1080p resolution, a punch hole for the selfie cam, and a standard 60Hz refresh rate. It's a bit smaller than the 6.5-inch displays of either the Realme 7 or the Realme 8 5G, and you miss out on the smoothness of a 90Hz refresh rate. But going from IPS LCD to AMOLED could be worth the trade-off. Thanks to AMOLED tech, you get deep and contrasty blacks, as well as better power efficiency if you stick to something like dark mode. You get HDR10 support too. The picture is plenty sharp and colors are vibrant, but not the most accurate, leaning towards bluish. As far as brightness goes, it's quite good. We measured a maximum of around 460 nits with the slider, which boosts to around 660 nits in auto mode when in bright conditions. Since the screen is an AMOLED, the Realme 8 also supports an always-on display to show you time and notifications while the phone sleeps. For audio, the Realme 8 has a 3.5mm jack for headphones, with direct sound and high-res audio certification. The single bottom-firing speaker isn't very loud, scoring just average on our loudness charts. Sound quality is nothing amazing either. Vocals and highs sound decent, but don't expect much bass. You also get 64 or 128 gigs of storage on the Realme 8 and it's expandable. The interface of the Realme 8 is Realme UI 2.0 based on Android 11. It's quite clean and straightforward with your standard home screen, notification shade, and optional app drawer. There's a personalizations menu which holds plenty of options for customizing the looks of the UI. From the task switcher, you can place an app into a floating window for multitasking. And there's a smart sidebar, which can store app shortcuts as well as functions. And finally, there's a game optimizer and launcher called GameSpace. From here, you can change performance parameters, and you can access Do Not Disturb options here too. Speaking of performance, the Realme 8 runs on a MediaTek Helio G95 chipset, which is built on a 12nm process. It's the same that was inside the Realme 7, and while it's not the most eye-catching budget chipset around, it's still pretty solid at this price point. In CPU benchmarks, performance is comparable to the Realme 8 5G, which has a MediaTek Dimensity 700 5G, as well as phones running on a Snapdragon 720G. The Realme 8 even has the edge over the Realme 8 5G in GPU tests. While you don't get 5G support here, there's enough power for the class. Tasks run smoothly and we didn't notice any overheating or throttling either. Just like the Realme 7 and the Realme 8 5G, the Realme 8 has a large 5000 mAh battery. With an endurance rating of 127 hours in our proprietary tests, battery life is actually a bit better than the 5G model. The phone comes with a 30-watt Dart charger in the box and is pretty fast, especially considering the big battery. We were able to charge the phone from 0 to 56% in half an hour, almost double what we could get with the Realme 8 5G's bundled 18-watt charger. The Realme 8 has 4 cameras on the back, a 64-megapixel quad-Bayer main camera, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 2-megapixel macro cam, and a depth sensor. This is quite different from the 5G model where you have a 48-megapixel main cam and no ultra-wide. Shots from the Realme 8's main cam come out in 16 megapixels by default, and they are good, especially for a budget phone. There's plenty of detail, lively colors, and decent dynamic range. The processing, however, is pretty heavy-handed, beyond anything we've seen lately, with plenty of over-sharpening and contrast enhancements. Even the cheaper Realme 8 5G with its 48-megapixel camera takes more natural-looking photos. Portraits are taken with the main camera with the help of the depth sensor. These are impressive for the class. with sharp and detailed subjects, accurate colors, and proficient separation. 8-megapixel shots from the ultra-wide are underwhelming. The exposure is noticeably dimmer than that of the main camera, and there's some softness around the edges of the frame. At least the dynamic range isn't too bad. 2-megapixel photos from the macro cam are also nothing to write home about. Getting a sharp result is difficult because of the fixed focus. And even if the focus is spot on, the result is soft and noisy with dull colors. Now on to low-light shooting. The main camera holds up pretty well in these situations, with a decent amount of detail thanks to the laid-back processing. Colors are true to life and contrast is good. Dynamic range is quite limited though, with clipped highlights and dark shadows. There is quite a lot of noise, and in fact the cheaper Realme 8 5G again takes the better photos here. If you toggle on AI scene detection, you'll often get a brighter exposure, and the HDR helps to improve the dynamic range a bit. Or if you don't mind the 5 to 10 seconds of processing time, you can use the night mode. This brightens up the photos even further, and they sometimes come out sharper. Highlights are still clipped, but the blowout isn't as extreme. The ultra-wide camera struggles in low light, and its photos are soft, with dull colors and blown-out highlights and light sources. While AI scene detection doesn't have much effect here, night mode does. These shots are brighter, with more detail and better controlled highlights. For selfies, the Realme 8 has a 16-megapixel front-facing camera with fixed focus. The quality is great here, with solid contrast, colors, and dynamic range. Resolve detail is decent too. Unlike the 5G model, the Realme 8 can capture 4K video at 30 FPS with the main camera. 4K footage looks great. There's plenty of detail, low noise, and punchy colors. Dynamic range isn't super wide, but it isn't that bad. The ultra-wide can shoot 1080p video at 30 FPS. Detail isn't great, and there's a lot of noise. At least the color reproduction is quite close to the main cameras. There is electronic stabilization available for both cameras, but only in 1080p at 30 FPS. It takes care of major bumps and shakes, but there are some small movements still left behind. So that's the Realme 8. You get an upgrade to an AMOLED display this time around, although it's just a 60Hz one. There's great battery life paired with pretty fast charging, a solid chipset for the class, and great selfies and video quality from the main cam. Compared to the 5G version, you get nicer features, but not necessarily better photos. And of course you miss out on the 5G connectivity. And at the same time, the nicer features you get here aren't quite as nice as what you can find elsewhere at this price. So overall, the Realme 8 is a decent compact smartphone, but it has some shortcomings, which are hard to justify unless you can find it at a discount. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe and see you on the next one.